Let's go ahead and start with a big congratulations to conjugate soldado Giovanni Robeson for his recent performance at the Black Frost Showdown, taking first place in the men's super heavyweight. Here's how we made it happen. So first off, let's talk about the events for this show. The first one was a log incline press for maximum reps at 285 pounds. Then it was a max Bavarian deadlift, Wessel's rules, a duck walk at 350 pounds, a sandbag carry and load medley at 280, 300, and 320, and then last but not least, power stairs. Now, it is worth mentioning the event was changed day of. Originally, there were 3 different implements, but they wound up just using one implement, and I couldn't get what the weight used was, so just think 3 stairs at whatever the weight was. Now, to give a quick background on Giovanni and I, we've been working together for about 7 months as of making this video, and in that time, we've been able to secure him the following finishes. 2nd place at Idaho's Strongest Man, as well as an overwhelming performance at Scary Strong, where he didn't even need to do the last event to win the show. He's naturally bigger and stronger, so one of the big things we focus on with him is his positioning and technique. We also want to use accessories that allow him to recover because he is going to put more of himself into every rep on the big compounds. Additionally, we were in a bit of a unique situation prepping for this show, as he's also got his eyes on static monsters, so we wanted to make sure that the 2 preps bled into one another. Now, if you've watched any of these, you know this is something I always talk about in every single video. When it comes to competition peaking, I'm personally a big believer in the jam a square peg into a round hole philosophy. I'm not saying that every single peak is going to look the exact same, but ultimately, you need to adapt to the show rather than having the show adapt around you. Whereas in the off-season, that's where you're going to be a bit more tailored and a bit more adaptive and reactive to the individual athlete. Again, it's sort of a fine line, and it's not that everyone runs the same exact prep, but you're going to see more commonalities in a peak than you would in the off-season if you look across multiple athletes training for a competition. So, recognizing this philosophy, here's how we applied that when it came to Giovanni's training for not only this competition, as well as understanding that we were prepping concurrently for static monsters. On day 1, the log session was kept intentionally lighter. What we did is we'd start with the incline log, and then from there we'd move on to strict log. And the reason why is I wanted to spare his lower back a little bit. That way, moving into day 2 session, which focused on squats and moving events, it wasn't as fatigued. Day 3, that's when we would hit the log push press, but we focused a lot more on singles, just building efficient technique at a fairly high percentage of 1RM. And the reason why we did this sort of strength skill approach, it was allowing him to not lose any of his, shall we say, suppleness underneath those heavy loads, but we weren't doing so much work that we were generating a lot of fatigue, just building a wide, reliable base. And then lastly, when it came to his deadlift training, we'd start the session with the Bavarian deadlift, as that was indeed our competition variation, but then we would also do deficit deads. And the reason why we opted for deficit deads as opposed to, say, something like a block pull is the Bavarian implement itself was actually set very low relative to the athlete's feet. It was more akin to a deficit deadlift. Additionally, by pulling from the floor from a deficit, that helped retain floor speed, starting strength, as well as forced us to use slightly lower loads. That way we were giving his CNS a bit of a break while pushing overload elsewhere in prep for Black Frost. For a lot of these stronger athletes, they don't need to train at high of intensities to get benefit from their training. So the first event was the incline log for reps, and how we trained this was fairly basic. We started with a heavy single at the beginning of prep just to kind of see where he was at, and then we spent most of our time in the 5 to 8 repetition range, just building overall strength and work capacity here. Additionally, we did a lot of slow eccentric horizontal pin presses, and the reason for this variation is it helped build a lot more endurance in the relevant muscles such as the upper pecs and triceps, and also, again, limited load so we weren't beating him up too badly. For a sample week of training, you'd see something like day 1 being the incline log to a heavy 5, and then 3 sets of 5 on the strict log. And then on day 3, or day 2 of upper body training, we might do something such as 8 doubles with every 90 seconds or so at 270, and then moving on to that pin press, again with the slow eccentric. Giovanni took the win here, performing 16 reps, good for first place and 3 points. Subtotal, 3 points. The second event was the Bavarian deadlift. We just used a very basic 1RM focused peak here, where we do some heavy triples and then some back off triples, heavy doubles, back off doubles, heavy singles, back off doubles. And then after the main Bavarian deadlift, again, as I'd said earlier, we'd move on to deficit deads. Additionally, in day 2 of his training week, we did use a wider stance SSB pause squat. And this particular squat variation came in very handy for the show, as it trained that position, which was relevant in multiple events, not only for the Bavarian deadlift, but also for the power stairs and the duck walk. As far as a sample deadlift session would look like, he'd hit a heavy single and then maybe 2 dubs at 90%. then 3 sets of 3 on the deficit deadlift, snatch grip high pulls at 205, reverse hyper, and then some behind the neck lat pull downs. As far as how this event went, 475 pounds, good for second place, 2 points. Subtotal, 5 points. Our third event was the duck walk. Now this was trained on an alternating weekly rotation with the power stairs just to help manage fatigue in between training for Static Monsters and this show. And as I alluded to earlier, the wider stance SSB pause squat came in extremely handy here. It is also worth mentioning that by training the duck walk, it had transference to power stairs in much the same way that a farmer's walk has transference to the deadlift. You'd also find that if you train the power stairs, it carried over to the duck walk to a certain degree, in much the same way the deadlift carries over to the farmer's walk to a certain degree. For a sample session, we do something such as 2 rounds of 50 feet at 230 pounds, then 2 runs at 250, and on that very last run, he would march in place doing 10 steps each foot just to sort of help him get used to that waddle. Event results here, he finished it in 8.76 seconds, good for first place, 3 points. Subtotal, 8 points. The fourth event was the sandbag carry and load medley. As far as training for this event goes, we did sandbag heart shocks. That's really about it. That was the main variation that we used to help improve this. I've talked about heart shocks repeatedly on this channel and will continue to talk about them because they are one of the single best predictors for performance on both loading and carrying medleys. Additionally, neutral grip rows and snatch grip high pulls help develop some of the necessary explosiveness to get the most performance come day of. As far as a sample session goes, 2 runs of 2 heart shocks at 280 pounds, for example. As far as this event goes, 21.79 seconds, first place, good for 3 points, subtotal, 11 points. And then last but not least was the power stairs event. This event was trained in that weekly alternating fashion with the duck walk as I had previously discussed. Additionally, we did make heavy use of snatch grip high pulls here to help build that explosive triple extension and get his upper back really working hard. The snatch grip high pull is honestly one of those movements that I think a lot more strong athletes would really benefit from integrating into their own programming. As far as how this might have looked, for example, he'd do 6 rounds of 5 repetitions at 250 pounds for the power stairs. Event results here, he finished it in 6.35 seconds, good for second place and 2 points, subtotal 13 points. So for the final scoring here, Giovanni wound up with 13 points, second place had 10, third place had 5. There is an error if you look at the scoring on Iron Podium. It shows that the person who finished second on the carry medley actually got 3 points, and vice versa, that Giovanni finished second place on the medley, thus only getting 2 points. So it looks like there's only a 1 point gap between them. This is incorrect. Alrighty, so here is a weekly snapshot of what Giovanni's training looked like. Day 1 was our first press focus day, and again, we weren't focusing on maximal overload here, but what we saw, for example, was he would do 2 sets of 8 at 250 on the incline log, and then a set of 5 to 8, and in that third set, I gave him a bit of a delta in terms of loading and reps, just so he could adjust based off how he felt. Then we did 8 singles on the log. Then it was some neutral grip rows, face pulls, overhead triceps, and landmine rotations. The landmine rotations are worth taking a moment to really discuss. This is, again, one of those movements that I think is incredibly underrated, but extremely valuable for the strongman athlete. The sport has quite a bit of rotational strength necessary to be successful in it. Because if you look at something such as a sandbag pick, you're rolling, you're moving, you're shifting left and right. You want to have the strength in that position, as well as the strength to, for lack of a better word, to lock in the bag if it gets away from you. And landmine rotations are incredibly valuable there. They build a lot of torso and core strength. Additionally, they help mobilize the hips a little bit, which is really good for those bigger bags so you can get a good, strong pick. Now on day 2, this was one of our primary event days. So we'd start with that paused Y stance SSB squat. And again, this was an incredibly valuable squat variation because it fed into multiple events. That wider pause stance, what that's going to do is that's going to feed into the duck walk by strengthening the adductors and hips. It's going to feed into the power stairs by strengthening that similar position. It's going to feed into the Bavarian deadlift, and it also helped feed into the sandbags because of the necessary pick angle. So 4 of the 5 events benefited from this squat iteration, and that really is something I'm big on when it comes to strongman, is we treat the squat as an accessory movement unless you are training it specifically for an event. We want to pick squat variations that minimize fatigue but maximize transference across the events that you're training for when peaking for a competition. Then after that, there were no power stairs this week as he was doing the duck walks. But what we did here is he did 2 runs at 260 pounds, but then he added in 3 high pulls. Not a true power stair, but something close enough. Then after that was 2 rounds of 280-pound sandbag heart shocks, and he would finish the second rep and do 1 big extension as if he were loading it just to get a little bit practice. Then we wrapped up with single leg glute bridges just to help with his stability in the hips. That way he wouldn't have any knee collapse or encounter any knee discomfort when performing these dynamic events throughout the day. Now, day 3 on this training week probably looks a little bit odd, but the reason why is we were actually sort of deloading on this individual day just based off of the feedback that I received on day 1, plus some fatigue and lifestyle things, but whatever. So again, we saw the log. It was 10 doubles done lighter, then that slow eccentric neutral grip pin press. I cannot emphasize enough how much I like triphasic or slow eccentrics for horizontal pressing when you are prepping for a strongman show, because it lets you get a lot of benefit from the movement without chasing maximal overload, but instead building positional strength and endurance. Then after that, we did some chest supported rows, rear delt flies, overhead triceps, and hammer curls. Pretty basic accessory loadout right here. And then last but certainly not least was our deadlift focus day, where we started with the Bavarian deadlift, then we would move into some deficit deads, snatch grip high pulls, reverse hypers, and behind the neck lats. Again, I just want to take a moment and say the snatch grip high pull, clean grip high pulls, trap bar high pulls in general are a fantastic exercise for the strongman athlete. Throw them in on a dynamic effort day. For example, you could do something such as trap bar high pulls and then move into deficit trap bar speed deads thereafter, and you're going to get a lot of benefit, including training that triple extension. They're adjacent to Olympic lifts, but you don't have the same technique bottleneck. They're going to be a little bit uglier, but honestly, strongman is generally an ugly sport. Being able to, sort of lack of better words, explosively muscle up a weight is part and parcel for success in the sport, which is why, again, I do like high pull variations for the strongman athlete. So ultimately, as far as takeaways go that you can use when looking at Giovanni's prep here, first one is the squat. The squat is an accessory. It is not the star of your training unless it is an event. Pick variations that limit load but maximize transference. You want that positional strength. Positional strength is insanely important for strongman athletes. Exercises such as half Turkish get-ups, windmills, they look awkward, they look janky, but that's what you need. Strongman isn't barbell shaped. You want movements that flex, extend, and rotate the spine. That way, if you find yourself in that position, you're not getting hurt. Aside from that, do your freaking heart shocks. They are incredible. But that wraps up everything I've got for you folks. Hope you found this one useful. If you have any comments or questions down below, let me know. I'd appreciate them. The best ones are ones I will turn into topic videos. Also, I offer one-to-one coaching. It's what I do full-time. Odds are very good. I'd love to work with you. But that's all I got for you folks. Take care, stay safe, hit some PRs.